the Gut Stuff. We're partnering with BioGaia to bring you Weaning with Guts. And Weaning Week's theme this year is Wean Wise, Gut Thrive. Is your gut thriving? Is it thriving? So, here at the Gut Stuff, we've pretty much got adult gut health on lockdown. But when it comes to kids, I literally didn't have a clue. So we've partnered with BioGaia to follow Bear's weaning journey with Lucy. Hi. Who's a children's dietitian to keep us on the right side of the tracks to follow Bear's journey for Weaning Week. Wish us luck. A baby's development of their gut microbiome doesn't just stop. And whilst it might not have had the most optimal start, there are so many things in the road ahead and so many paths that you can choose that are going to lead it in a positive direction. And I think so many people need to hear that. As new parents, I have lots of people come to me, sometimes even antenatally. I do wonder if there's an area of antenatal education to be done so that you feel equipped once your baby is given birth, and because there's so much out of your control. And I remember you saying to me, you had all of the plans in mind for how you were going to give birth, that golden hour after birth, that you're going to be sauntering out of the hospital a few hours later, off we go, swinging the
bacteria everywhere.
Bacteria everywhere. Smothered. Smothered in bacteria, all the skin to skin, all of those sorts of things. And it didn't happen the way you planned.
No, exactly. And I think that's the thing, like, you know, I had an emergency C-section, I had antibiotics, like literally could not have been less of the plan.
Yes.
And so when I started weaning, I was like nervous that, when I started thinking about weaning, I was nervous that I would, you know, it would be a nightmare because I haven't been able to give him his microbial start that I wanted. But also
that first inoculation, everybody is like, it's so important. And actually adds another layer of pressure for so many people because, as you know, giving birth and those first few days of life, so many things are outside of your control. And I mean, I personally find it really difficult because I am also someone who likes the predictability and being in control. And you have to totally let go. And it's so easy. I have so many mothers who come to me and say, I feel like a complete failure. Have I ruined their gut health for life? You know, what can I do now? Is that it? Is it done? You know, should I have had better X, Y, and Z? And it can rile up all these feelings of like anger and frustration. And, you know, people have called me days after birth in tears, like, what can I do? And like the bottom line is, you know, a baby's development of their gut microbiome doesn't just stop. And whilst it might not have had the most optimal start, there are so many things in the road ahead and so many paths that you can choose that are going to lead it in a positive direction. And I think so many people need to hear that. That like, all of this is outside of your control. There are loads of things that you can do that are going to support now. Here's what they are. And, you know, we can talk about all of those things. And it doesn't really ever stop. I think it's really important to remember that we know it's the first 3 years of life are the most important for the evolution of that gut microbiome, which I think is really interesting because you do a lot of adult gut health and I do a lot of pediatric gut health, and it's being able to sort of tap into both. Sort of understanding that we know there are things that we can do as adults, and lots of those practices can translate when we start feeding our children, but also we do have this finite window when we can make a difference and tangibly make a change. You don't need to feel guilty about how you've given birth, and even practices about, you know, how you might initially feed, those sorts of things, because there are so many other pit stops and things you can introduce that are going to help to shape that microbiome in that first 3 years.
What obviously coming from the gut health world, I was just so paranoid about, I mean, literally I was having to have an emergency C-section, so, can I have a vaginal swab, please? And they're like, hey, this is a threat to life scenario, and probably not
so
time for a vaginal swab. And I think that it causes, because there's a lot on the internet now, it causes a lot of people anxiety when it comes to weaning. But I think, you know, seeing it as an opportunity to start to introduce things and start to think about the microbiome and spin it in a positive way is fair.
Yeah, absolutely.
And in terms of like how to get, you know, I think a lot of people are paranoid if they do have a colicky baby or a sicky baby. Starting weaning is even more anxious because they don't want to make it worse.
Yes, and it can often mean that they fall into some of those practices. We're going to put it in the like bullshit bin. People get fed misinformation that actually can be quite detrimental from a gut health perspective. So like one new food every 3 days, I'm really sorry. You can't do that for most children. You're not going to introduce them to a wide range of foods. They're not going to get the variety they need. They're also not going to get the experience that they need from it, like in big texture and taste windows. People are always very upset when I'm like, you know, your biggest windows for taste and texture acceptance are like 6 to 10 months. It is, and I think that's the thing, is that there's this huge amount of pressure as a parent to get it right.
So what are the tangible things? Because I think, you know, I think, and as well, all the like breast milk versus formula scenario, there's a lot of guilt around that. So if people do, you know, for whatever reason, choice or whatever, have to give formula, should we be supplementing with things like probiotics as well?
There's so much progress, and the bottom line is you just can't replicate breast milk, and no one will ever be able to do that. And formula companies use breast milk as a blueprint, knowing they'll never be able to reach it, but going, okay, well, HMO's fourth most abundant thing in breast milk, indigestible. The whole point of them is to get down to the gut, undigested, and feed all the bacteria. And so now everyone's trying to replicate human milk oligosaccharides in, you know, in formula milk and in other ways. The thing about probiotic is something that's safe, that's effective, a well evidence-based strain, and is suitable for breast and formula fed infants. Universally, there is something all parents could choose to do that's not going to cause harm and has the potential to help shape that gut microbiome in a really positive way.
Yeah, and I think that's the because I think there's so, like, what I found really difficult was like the information to trust, and brands to trust, because you know so often I was just going online going, I'll buy that, but it comes to like even like the toys and stuff, I'm like, oh God, can he put that in his mouth? And I think,
what's the material?
Being able to trust something that a probiotic has been
rigorously tested, third party tested, and also has the evidence base behind it.
Should we be like, before we start weaning, this is another thing that you sort of are sold, getting allergy tests, and we'll get onto this later, but should we do we have to go and get tested for?
No, I mean, the first thing to say is lots of people get drawn in by allergy or intolerance tests online. Wild waste of money. If I see another parent spend £250 on an IgG food test that's got no evidence base, and I'm like, I said to one mum, imagine getting £250 out cash and then flushing it down the toilet. That's literally what you've done. And she was a mum who was willing for me to be like, you don't need to do that. But it's because it comes from that place of all any parent ever wants is to make the right decisions for their child. More and more so, people want to be told what to do. They provide something very affirmative,
binary,
very binary. Do give this, don't give this, but there's just no evidence base for it.
So probiotics, yes. Allergy testing, no. Anything else we can do to help prep our guts?
I would say, so it's looking at the environment as a whole. So there are things you can't control. So you cannot control how your baby was delivered. And it's nothing to feel guilty about. Obviously, there are things you control around feeding in terms of breast or formula milk and choices made around that. But then there are other wider things. So actually, things that really positively impact the gut microbiome development in children, being outside in nature. And I always talk about children's development because they're like, why does everything go in their mouth? And I'm like, that's probably also a massive throwback to a really good way of getting exposure. And I know people feel like germs and it's really easy to like melt and everything within an inch of its life. But actually, they probably need that. It's probably developmentally, yes, oral exploration, getting to grips with the world around them, all that sensory development, but also lots of access to germs, which are probably going to be a positive thing for the gut. So get your kids outside, get them in nature. Furry friends, good for the gut. I'm always like, yay, get the dogs.
Puppy as well as the newborn. Why not?
Well, we may as well always get dogs.
In for a penny.
Yeah, absolutely. Socialising with other children. And that feels counterintuitive to lots of parents. And as a parent who has just sent her child to nursery, I'm like, really? Really? Do we want them to socialise? Because she's been sick. There is good evidence that socialising, having siblings, those sorts of things, again, can have a really positive impact on the kind of diversity that you have within your gut microbiome. And then obviously there's weaning. So then we're going to talk about that, things that you offer, things that you avoid, and even the way that sort of food's prepared. There's lots of information now about understanding foods that you prepare at home, fresh foods, versus foods that have been pre-prepared and packaged and sold to you. And that's, again, parents will use those foods, but it's about understanding why they're different to foods that you might mash a banana at home rather than buying it in a pouch. What's the difference there? So lots of positive things you can control, lots of things that you can't control. And as a parent, I think there's an element of just accepting, I cannot change those things. Here are some decisions I can make. So weaning, variety, probiotic, strains that get down to the gut, that are well evidence-based, that are going to, basically, I always say, you need a probiotic that is proven to get there, and once it's there, proven to stay there, multiply and do its job. And, you know, people will always say to me, should I give it, you know, the word we use in the medical world is prophylactically. Should I just give it once my baby's born? I always remind people that is a safe thing to do, unless your baby's premature or for some reason sort of immunocompromised. Absolutely fine. And focusing on doing it as part of a regular routine. And it might be alongside, for example, you know, if your baby's exclusively breastfed, they should also be having some vitamin D. So either combining them, obviously by a guy, you've got a combined supplement that's got the vitamin D and the bacteria strain, or giving alongside and having it as part of a routine, because you're also knackered and you never remember.
I always think as well, like, doing something that you think could potentially be helping. You know, it's really, whatever it is,
really validating as a parent, because you just think, it's not something that's going to cause any harm, as I say, in a healthy baby and a healthy infant. And as you say, it's something that you feel like you're tangibly doing every day that could be really, really supportive. Because there's always seeds of doubt as a parent. We're both new parents. That you're doing something wrong, and you give yourself a really hard time for, like, oh, I missed the baby group, or I haven't been able to get out for a walk with them every day, because life happens. Whereas I think sometimes, as you say, putting something like a probiotic into their routine is something you can do every day that is totally obtainable. And that's really important, because there's nothing like setting yourself wild expectations as a parent. Like, I'm going to do this every day, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do 45 minutes of tummy time, and then you don't do it, and you just sit at the end of the day with
like a pig on their tummy, and you're like, maybe just be 45 seconds.
Absolutely. And I think there's then, for lots of parents, that kind of, as they approach weaning, I get lots of questions about, I've had a really colicky baby, I've had a really fractious baby, I've got a baby who's still presenting with like regurgitation or reflux. The two are different. And what can I do about that? Because I'm really nervous about going into weaning. I have some parents who delay. They're like, you know, I'll sit there and be like, your baby is developmentally ready, you can get going. And they're so nervous because they've heard or read or seen, or somebody's told them at their baby class that this food is going to make it worse. This food's, you know, and they're going to be up all night screaming, and you're going to lose more sleep because they're going to be gassy, and all of these things. And again, including a well evidence-based probiotic strain that is got robust kind of grounding in also management of those conditions. So we know Lactobacillus reuteri is really, really well evidence-based in the management of colic, particularly in breastfed baby. It's in like national guidelines now, European guidelines. It's, again, that tangible. There's something I can do. I can support that population of bacteria in a positive way in my child's gut. Hopefully achieve some symptom improvement, which is ideal, you know, less crying, much more comfortable, and help set up the gut to be ready to go to. And again, it's something you can control and something you can include, and something that is evidence-based, which is really important, because there is Wild West information out there about what you should and you shouldn't be doing with children.
Just as a breakthrough, the first step of the paralysis of I don't know where to start. That's a really tangible thing to start with.
Tangible, achievable, evidence-based. Great. I mean, isn't that great? And you're like, tick, 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 tick.